The metallic taste of fear is always lurking at the back of my throat these days. I never imagined it would come to this, barricading myself in my house, against her. It's beyond messed up. It claws at me, this guilt. But the memory of what she did, what they both did, it hardens my resolve. Let me rewind. My name is Eleanor, and I have a sister, Vivian. God, even saying her name feels like swallowing broken glass. Vivian was everything I wasn't. Dazzling, reckless, adored. She had this way of making the mundane seem pathetic. She floated through life, snagging every shimmering prize, while I slogged away, building something solid, something mine. Vivian married young, had 2 perfect little girls, Clara and Iris, and inherited our grandmother's sprawling Victorian house. I took the sensible path, the one everyone secretly or not so secretly pitied. I worked my ass off at the accounting firm, saved every penny, and eventually, finally, bought my own place, a modest, 2-story house with a manageable yard. It was nothing like Vivian's grand estate, but it was mine. I bled for that mortgage. Eleanor, you're so predictable, Vivian would purr, her eyes glittering with amusement at family gatherings. Work, bills, sleep, repeat. Where's the spark? I'd just shrug, feeling the sting of her words, but clinging to the quiet pride I had in my life. My routines, my independence, my little patch of peace. I should have known that peace was an illusion, a fragile thing destined to be shattered. About 6 months ago, Vivian exploded into my carefully curated life like a supernova. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was elbow deep in cleaning supplies when she burst through the door, her eyes practically vibrating with manic energy. Eleanor, you will not believe what I found, she practically shrieked, kicking off her designer heels and throwing her Birkin bag onto my sofa without a second glance. The scent of expensive perfume, a constant reminder of the chasm between our lives, filled the room. That look in her eyes. It was the same look she had when she'd convinced our parents to let her run off to Europe at 18, leaving me to shoulder the responsibilities at home. The same look she wore when she planned that destination wedding in Santorini, plunging our family into debt. Disaster always followed that gleam in her eye. What is it this time, Vivian? I asked, trying to keep the weariness out of my voice. This is it, Eleanor. The thing we've been waiting for. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling slightly, and shoved some slick, overly designed presentation in my face. This amazing medical startup. They're revolutionizing healthcare. Joshua and I are thinking of selling the house and investing everything. You should too. I stared at her, numb. Sell my house? To invest in a startup? The thought was insane. She rolled her eyes, that infuriating, condescending gesture that always made my blood boil. Don't be so scared, Eleanor. This is a guaranteed return. Triple the investment in a year. You could buy a mansion after that. Vivian, I don't know anything about medical startups or investments, I stammered, trying to inject some sense into the conversation. And I'm perfectly happy with my house. She pinned me with that familiar look of pity, the one I'd spent my entire life trying to ignore. That's why you'll always be stuck, Eleanor. Afraid to take risks. You're just stagnant. The conversation spiraled into a full-blown argument. I accused her of being reckless, of jeopardizing her family's security for some pie-in-the-sky dream. She accused me of being a loser, of being too afraid to grasp opportunity. It always came back to that, me, the failure, her, the shining star. When I expressed my concern for Clara and Iris, for the potential impact on their lives, she just laughed, a cold, brittle sound that cut me to the core. They'll be fine, Eleanor. They'll be living like royalty. Trust me, they'll thank me later. I walked away from that conversation feeling sick. She wouldn't listen to reason. Her eyes were blinded by the potential for wealth, for the chance to shine even brighter. The next day, I went to see our parents, clutching at the last shred of hope that they might be able to talk some sense into her. Foolish, I know. They had always favored Vivian, excused her impulsiveness, celebrated her spirit. Why would anything be different now? Mom was in the kitchen, making her signature lasagna, the aroma filling the air with a false sense of comfort. I laid out my concerns, my voice trembling slightly. Your sister told me about the investment opportunity, Mom said, not even bothering to look up from her cooking. I think you should seriously consider it, Eleanor. I felt a wave of despair wash over me. Mom, she's talking about selling her house, her only house, and putting all that money into some scam, probably. Mom slammed her spatula down, her face hardening. That familiar expression of disappointment, the one that always made me feel like a child again, settled on her features. Why can't you be more like your sister? She sighed, shaking her head. Vivian is always striving for self-actualization. She's not afraid to take risks. But you're just lazy, Eleanor. You don't want to change your life for the better. Lazy? The first cried, my voice cracking. I work hard, Mom. I pay my bills. I bought my own house. Yes, but you're not living, Eleanor, Dad chimed in, leaning against the counter. You're just existing. Vivian is seizing the moment. I wanted to scream, to rage against their blindness, their unwavering belief in Vivian's delusions. But I just stood there, feeling the familiar weight of their disapproval pressing down on me. Over the next few weeks, I waged a desperate, losing battle to try and reason with Vivian. Countless phone calls, each one ending in the same soul-crushing argument. Eleanor, this is my chance to get rich, she'd scream, her voice shrill with desperation. Stop being such a party pooper. This is a legitimate investment. Have you even researched this company? I'd plead. Have you talked to a financial advisor? But she wouldn't listen. She was possessed, consumed by the allure of wealth and the desperate need to prove herself right. She sold the house. Their house! The one that had been in our family for generations. I couldn't fathom it. How could she be so blind? So selfish? She invested most of the money in that damned medical startup. With what was left, she and Joshua whisked Clara and Iris off to the Maldives, renting some ridiculous beachfront villa while they waited for their dividends to roll in. And then, the photos started. They flooded my phone, an incessant, agonizing stream of carefully curated perfection. Vivian, tanned and glowing, posing on pristine beaches. Clara and Iris, laughing in crystal clear water. Sunset dinners by the ocean, the air thick with the scent of privilege. Each picture came with a caption, a carefully crafted barb designed to twist the knife. Living my best life while some people are too scared to chase their dreams. Blessed #risk taker another day in paradise, while the boring people stay home. YOLO #making it happen, even our parents got in on it. During our weekly family dinners, they'd scroll through Vivian's Instagram feed, their eyes shining with vicarious pleasure. Look at this, Eleanor, Dad would say, shaking his head. You could be there too, if you weren't so careful all the time. Your sister really knows how to live, Mom would add, a hint of reproach in her voice. It's not too late to join her, you know. The investment opportunity is still open. I'd sit there silently, choking down my food, the air thick with their unspoken judgment. Sometimes, I wondered if I was the crazy one. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was missing out. But deep down, in the pit of my stomach, a cold, gnawing feeling told me this was all too good to be true. That this glittering paradise was built on a foundation of sand, destined to crumble. And then, 6 months passed. The photos stopped coming. At first, I told myself she'd finally gotten tired of trying to make me jealous. Maybe, just maybe, she was finally realizing the gravity of her decision. But then, one morning, I saw the headlines. Medical startup exposed as massive fraud scheme. Thousands of investors lose everything in healthcare scam. Startup funders flee country amid fraud investigation. My hand shook so violently I could barely hold my phone. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The words swam before my eyes, each one a hammer blow to my already fragile equilibrium. The company Vivian had bet everything on. It was a sham. An elaborate, meticulously crafted con that had left thousands of investors in ruins. All that money, our grandmother's house, everything was gone. I tried calling Vivian, my heart pounding in my chest, but her phone was off. Joshua's too. Panic clawed at me, a suffocating wave of dread. What had she done? What were they going to do? Finally, after 3 days of agonizing silence, I got a text from Mom. "Your sister's coming home." They arrived at our parents' house looking like refugees. Gone was the sun-kissed, carefree family from those sickening beach photos. Vivian's designer clothes were replaced with cheap, wrinkled travel wear. Joshua, who always looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine, was unshaven, gaunt, and haunted. Clara and Iris, usually so bubbly and energetic, were subdued, clinging to their mother like frightened animals. They'd spent every last penny they had from the house sale, desperately clinging to their lavish lifestyle in the Maldives, convinced that the investment would pay off any day now. They had drained their savings, maxed out their credit cards, and borrowed money from friends and family, all in the name of staying positive and manifesting abundance. Now, the chickens had come home to roost. I saw them at our parents' place. Vivian looked like a ghost. The gloss was gone, the confidence evaporated. I should have felt some sort of vindication, but all I felt was a gut-wrenching sadness. What had she done to her children? 2 weeks later, Mom called me, her voice strained, almost unrecognizable. "Eleanor, we need to talk," she said, her usual air of disapproval replaced with a desperate plea. "Can you come over?" When I arrived, the house was a disaster zone. Toys scattered everywhere, suitcases still half unpacked in the corners, the air thick with the scent of stale food and desperation. Clara and Iris were running around upstairs, their laughter sounding shrill and unnatural. Mom looked like she hadn't slept in days, dark circles etched under her eyes. Dad was slumped on the couch, his face buried in his hands. "I can't do this anymore," Mom confessed, collapsing into a kitchen chair, her voice barely a whisper. "Our house is too small for all of us. I haven't had a proper night's sleep in 2 weeks. And I'm constantly cooking and cleaning. I'm exhausted." Dad nodded miserably, looking equally worn out. "Eleanor, we hate to ask this, but you have that big house." Before they could even finish, Vivian came stumbling into the kitchen, her eyes red and puffy from crying. Gone was the smug, self-assured sister who'd mocked my boring life choices. In her place stood a broken, desperate woman I barely recognized. "Please, Eleanor," she sobbed, grabbing my hands, her grip surprisingly strong. Just for 3 months. That's all we need. Joshua and I will find jobs, save up for a place of our own. I promise we won't stay longer than that." Clara and Iris peeked around the door frame, their faces pale and uncertain. They looked so small, so vulnerable. I looked at Vivian, really looked at her, stripped bare of her pretenses, her armor of wealth and privilege shattered. 3 months, I finally said, my voice firm, despite the turmoil churning inside me. "Not a day more. And I mean it, Vivian, thank you." "Thank you." Vivian threw her arms around me, her body shaking with sobs. "We'll have everything figured out by then. You won't regret this." I wanted to believe her. I desperately wanted to believe that this was a temporary setback, that Vivian would pull herself together and reclaim her life. But a cold, cynical voice inside me whispered that this was just the beginning of a whole new kind of disaster. The first few weeks of having Vivian's family in my house were interesting. I'd naively assumed they would immediately start pounding the pavement, desperately searching for jobs. I envisioned resumes being polished, interviews being scheduled, and a general air of frantic activity. Instead, my house became some kind of bizarre social hub. Vivian and Joshua's friends were constantly coming and going, filling my living room with their loud laughter and incessant chatter. "We need to decompress," Vivian explained one evening, when I found her and Joshua drinking expensive wine with their friends in my living room, while I was trying to prepare a simple dinner for myself. We also need to maintain our social connections. That's how you find good job opportunities. But weeks passed, and these social connections weren't leading to any actual job offers. Every morning, I'd leave for work to find them still in their pajamas, lounging around the house, planning another networking event. Every evening, I'd come home to find them networking with their friends, while I cleaned up after them and tried to maintain some semblance of order in my increasingly chaotic house. "When are you actually going to start looking for work?" I finally asked, 1 month into their stay, my voice tight with barely suppressed frustration. Joshua scoffed, scrolling through his phone, not even bothering to look at me. "You're so uptight, Eleanor. We're still processing our trauma. We need time to gain strength." "Trauma?" I snapped. "You lost money. You made a bad investment. It's not like you survived a war." Vivian glared at me, her eyes flashing with anger. "You have no idea what we've been through, Eleanor. The stress, the humiliation. It's been devastating." I wanted to scream, to tell them to grow up, to take responsibility for their actions. But I bit my tongue, reminding myself that they were guests, that they were vulnerable, that Clara and Iris were listening. Finally, after a month of processing, they both found jobs. Vivian got a position as a marketing consultant at some small, struggling company. Joshua landed a job as a bartender at a trendy downtown club. I thought this would be the turning point, that they'd start saving money for their own place, that they'd finally begin to rebuild their lives. I was wrong. Instead of saving, they started spending their salaries on what Vivian called maintaining their standard of living. My kitchen became filled with exotic ingredients I couldn't pronounce, delivered by expensive specialty food services. My electricity bill skyrocketed as they ran the air conditioning 24/7. The water bill doubled as Vivian indulged in long, luxurious baths every evening. "I can't just switch to regular food overnight," Vivian explained one evening, while unpacking a $200 grocery delivery from some organic farm. "My body got used to certain things in the Maldives. I need to transition slowly. And the clothes!" The shopping bags kept piling up, filled with new outfits for Vivian and Joshua to keep up appearances at their jobs. I felt like I was drowning, suffocating under the weight of their extravagance and their blatant disregard for my financial well-being. But I kept telling myself it was just for a few months. 3 months? That was the deal. I could handle anything for 3 months. As the 3-month mark approached, I knew I had to have a serious conversation with Vivian. I couldn't keep living like this, being bled dry by their recklessness. I found her in the kitchen, ordering another exotic meal delivery on her phone. "Vivian," I said, trying to keep my voice casual, despite the knot of anxiety twisting in my stomach. "Have you started looking for places to rent?" She looked up from her phone, her eyes widening in mock surprise. "Oh, Eleanor, come on, don't be so pushy. We need more time to find the right place." "More time," I repeated, my voice rising slightly. "The agreement was 3 months. Vivian, that was the deal." She frowned, that familiar expression of wounded innocence settling on her face. "Why are you being so selfish, Eleanor? We need to find a place that's in the right school district for the girls." "These things take time. And how many places have you actually looked at?" I pressed, my patience wearing thin. Her silence was answer enough. That evening, my phone rang. It was Mom. "Eleanor, Vivian told me you're trying to kick them out," she said, her voice tight with accusation. "I'm not kicking them out, Mom," I said, trying to remain calm. "The agreement was 3 months." "It's been 3 months. She has small children, Eleanor," Mom cried. "You can't just send them out on the street." "What kind of sister are you?" I closed my eyes, feeling a throbbing headache building behind my temples. "Fine," I said, finally, defeated. 3 more months. "But that's it, Mom. This is the last extension they're getting. You're doing the right thing, Eleanor. Mom said, her voice softening slightly. They're family, after all. Family. That word was starting to feel more like a burden than a blessing. As I hung up the phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made a huge mistake, that I'd just opened the door to another 3 months of financial strain, emotional manipulation, and the slow erosion of my sanity. When the utility bills arrived that month, I nearly had a heart attack. The numbers were astronomical, more than triple what I usually paid. The water usage had skyrocketed. The electricity consumption was through the roof, and don't even get me started on the heating bill. They were behaving like they were in some tropical paradise, not suburban New York. I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by bills, doing calculations that made my head spin. My mortgage payment was already substantial. I had put down a hefty down payment using the money Grandma left, but the monthly payments were still significant. Now, with 4 additional people in the house, all with very expensive tastes, my utilities had become another massive expense, one I hadn't planned for and couldn't afford. "Vivian," I called out one evening, waving the bills in my hand. "We need to talk about these." She glanced at the papers, then back at her phone, her expression bored. "Oh, those look high. They are high. Very high. I think it's reasonable that you and Joshua help with them, considering you're both working now." She looked at me as if I'd suggested she donate a kidney. "Eleanor, we're trying to save money for our own place. Remember, we can't afford to pay bills right now. Besides," she added with a dismissive wave of her hand, "everything will work out. Stop worrying so much." But I had plenty to worry about. On top of the financial strain, I'd somehow become an unpaid babysitter. Every weekday followed the same exhausting routine. Our parents would pick up Clara and Iris from school and watch them until I finished work. Then, instead of going home to relax, I'd drive to our parents' house to collect my nieces, who were starting to seem more like a burden than beloved family. I'd take them back to my house, help them with their homework, which often meant doing it for them, since neither Vivian nor Joshua seemed particularly interested in their education, make dinner, and then wait. Vivian and Joshua were supposed to be home by 6:00 p.m., but they rarely arrived before 9:00 p.m. "Sorry, we're late," Vivian would breeze in, looking far too put together for someone who'd supposedly been stuck at work. The meeting ran long, or traffic was a nightmare, or we had to stop and, network. I understood perfectly when I saw the Instagram stories their friends posted. Happy hour drinks, fancy dinners, exclusive social events, all featuring my sister and her husband, living it up while I sat at home watching their children. One particularly late night, after they'd finally returned home, reeking of expensive cocktails and perfume, and the girls were fast asleep, I confronted Vivian again about their plans to move out. "The deadline for this extended stay is coming up," I reminded her, my voice tight with controlled anger. "Have you started looking for places?" She waved her hand dismissively, not even bothering to look at me. "Everything will be fine, Eleanor. You really need to stop stressing about everything." "That's not an answer, Vivian. Are you even saving any money?" "Of course we are," she said, but wouldn't meet my eyes. "Just trust me, okay? When have I ever let you down?" she added with a saccharine sweetness that made my skin crawl. I bit my tongue to keep from listing all the times she had, in fact, let me down. Instead, I watched her disappear upstairs to her room, my guest room in my house, that I was paying for, while I sat surrounded by bills I couldn't afford and a growing resentment I couldn't contain. 6 months. It had been 6 months of mounting bills, endless babysitting, and watching my sister and her husband treat my house like their personal resort. I was at the breaking point. I decided it was time for one final definitive conversation. I couldn't keep living like this. My life was slipping away, consumed by their drama and their endless needs. I called them both into the living room one evening, after the girls had gone to bed, my hands shaking slightly as I faced them. "We need to talk," I said. sitting across from them, trying to project an air of calm confidence, despite the storm raging inside me. Next week marks exactly 6 months since you moved in, I continued, my voice firm. As we agreed, that's when you need to move out. I expected protests, explanations, maybe even promises to start looking for a place immediately. I'd braced myself for tears, for guilt trips, for the usual barrage of emotional manipulation. What I didn't expect was laughter. Vivian actually laughed, throwing her head back and letting out a high-pitched, almost hysterical sound. "Move out?" she said, still chuckling, wiping a tear from her eye. "Oh, Eleanor, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious." The agreement was 6 months. That was already double the original time we discussed. Vivian exchanged an amused glance with Joshua before turning back to me, her eyes gleaming with a chilling mixture of defiance and triumph. "But why would we move?" she asked, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "The girls love it here. We're all settled in. And let's be honest, Eleanor, this is good for you too." "Good for me?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Of course!" "Think about it, Eleanor. You're getting real-life experience in taking care of a family. It's perfect practice for when you finally settle down and have kids of your own. You should be thanking us, really." I sat there, stunned into silence, as Joshua nodded in enthusiastic agreement. "Plus," he added, spreading his arms wide, gesturing around the living room, "this is a wonderful house for a large family. There's plenty of room for all of us. No point in having all this space just for one person, right?" They continued talking, oblivious to my mounting rage, making plans about future room arrangements, discussing how we could optimize the space better, even suggesting I redecorate to better suit their tastes. But I'd stopped listening. In that moment, everything clicked into place. The delays, the excuses, the broken promises, it all made sense. They had never intended to leave. They had been playing me the entire time, using my guilt, my compassion, my own sense of obligation against me. They had seen my house as a free haven, a place to land after their reckless gamble had failed, a place to exploit and take advantage of. I nodded along with whatever they were saying, letting them think they'd won. I even managed a weak smile, pretending to agree with their ludicrous suggestions. But inside my head, a plan was already forming. A plan that involved new locks, packed boxes, and a long overdue reckoning. The next morning, I called my office and scheduled a vacation day for the following week, citing personal reasons without elaborating. Then I started researching locksmiths. I needed someone discreet, someone who could get the job done quickly and efficiently, without asking too many questions. I also started formulating a plan for dealing with the inevitable fallout. I knew my parents would be furious, my relatives would be outraged, and Vivian would unleash a torrent of accusations and recriminations. But I didn't care. I was done being their doormat, their safety net, their convenient solution to every problem they created. I was taking my life back, one locked door at a time. 7 days later, the day I'd marked on my calendar with grim anticipation, I woke up early, my heart pounding in my chest. I got dressed as if I was going to work, putting on a blazer and a pair of sensible shoes, anything to avoid suspicion. I waited until Vivian and Joshua had left for their jobs, their goodbyes casual and perfunctory, as if nothing was amiss. Then, as soon as their car disappeared down the street, I sprang into action. The locksmith arrived at 9:00 a.m., sharp, a burly, no-nonsense man who didn't waste any time getting to work. While he fiddled with the locks, I started on the bedrooms. 6 months of their lives had spread through my house like an invasive species, cluttering every corner, disrupting every routine. But I was determined to eradicate it all, to reclaim my space and restore order to my chaotic life. I worked methodically, room by room, packing their clothes, books, toiletries, and all their belongings into sturdy cardboard boxes. I labeled each box carefully, taking inventory of its contents, wanting to ensure there would be no accusations of missing or damaged items. Their expensive organic groceries went into separate boxes, kept cold with ice packs and insulation, anything to be professional. The girls' toys and school supplies were organized and labeled, their favorite stuffed animals carefully placed on top of their neatly folded clothes. I was angry, yes, but I wasn't going to be cruel about it. This wasn't about punishing the children. It was about reclaiming my life and setting clear boundaries. By early afternoon, the locksmith had finished installing the new locks, handing me the keys with a knowing glance. I thanked him, paid him in cash, and watched as he drove away, leaving me alone with my task. I stood in my newly emptied guest rooms, looking at the bare mattresses and empty closets, feeling a strange mixture of guilt and relief swirling inside me. The guilt stemmed from the thought that I was breaking up a family. The relief sprang from the thought that I was, for the first time in far too long, looking after myself. The house was eerily silent, the absence of Vivian and Joshua's noise and clutter creating a void that was both unsettling and strangely liberating. As evening approached, my phone started buzzing incessantly with calls from Mom. I watched it ring and ring, each time her name flashing on the screen, a silent accusation. I didn't answer. Then the texts started coming, each one more frantic and accusatory than the last. Eleanor, where are you? The girls are waiting. Eleanor, this isn't funny. Come get the children now. Eleanor, answer your phone. What is going on? I turned my phone to silent, the messages continuing to pour in, a relentless stream of guilt and recrimination. I steeled myself, determined not to crack under the pressure. I knew this was going to be ugly, but I was prepared to face the storm. I was prepared to defend my decision, to protect my peace, to reclaim my life. I waited, pacing the floor, my nerves stretched taut. I replayed the events of the day in my head, wondering if I'd missed anything, if I'd forgotten anything. Around 9:30 p.m., I heard them pull up in the driveway. There was the usual sound of car doors slamming, children chattering, and then the unmistakable jingle of keys against new locks. The confusion started first. I could hear them trying different keys, probably thinking they were putting them in incorrectly, or that the lock was simply being stubborn. Then came Joshua's voice, a low growl of frustration. What the hell? The knocking started softly at first, a tentative rap on the door. Then it grew louder, more insistent, more demanding. Eleanor. Vivian's voice rang out, her tone a mixture of disbelief and outrage. The keys aren't working. Let us in. I walked to the door, my heart pounding in my chest, my hands trembling slightly. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. The keys aren't working because I changed the locks, I said, my voice surprisingly firm, despite the turmoil churning inside me. There was a moment of stunned silence, a deafening pause that stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Then came the explosion. You what? Vivian screamed, her voice shrill with fury. Open this door right now. No, I said, my voice unwavering. I'm done. I'm done paying double utilities. I'm done being your unpaid babysitter. I'm done watching you waste money while living rent-free in my house. I heard the girls starting to cry, their sobs piercing the night air. Vivian immediately used that to her advantage, pulling them closer to the door, their cries clearly audible. Listen to them, Eleanor, she wailed, her voice dripping with manipulative desperation. Look what you're doing to your own nieces. How can you be so heartless? Don't you dare use your children as emotional blackmail, I said, my voice shaking with anger. If you cared about their stability, you wouldn't have gambled away their home on a get-rich-quick scheme. You wouldn't have spent 6 months avoiding responsibility while I cleaned up your mess. Just let us in, Eleanor, Vivian pleaded, changing tactics, her voice softening slightly. We can talk about this. We can work something out. There's nothing to talk about. Your things are packed in boxes in the garage. You can take them now. You had no right to do this, Joshua shouted, his voice laced with barely controlled rage. "I had every right. This is my house. The house I pay for. The house you've been living in for free while lying to my face about finding your own place." They stood outside for another 20 minutes, alternating between threats, pleadings, and insults, their voices echoing through the quiet neighborhood. I stood firm, refusing to budge, refusing to engage. Finally, I heard them moving toward the garage. The sound of cardboard boxes being dragged and loaded into their car filled the night air, punctuated by Vivian's loud complaints and Joshua's angry muttering. Just as I thought it was over, just as I was starting to feel a glimmer of relief, my phone rang again. It was Mom. "Eleanor, how dare you throw your sister out?" she screamed before I could even say hello. "What kind of person does this to their own family? Vivian should be living with you. You need to help your sister." "I did help her, Mom. For 6 months. Now it's your turn? Let's see how you like having them live with you for half a year." The line went dead. I stood in my empty, quiet house, feeling simultaneously terrible and relieved. I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for the first time in 6 months, I could breathe freely in my own home. I was finally free. Or so I thought. The aftermath of that night was exactly what I expected. A full-blown family meltdown. Within days, my phone was flooded with messages and calls from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Apparently, Mom had been busy spreading her version of events, painting me as the villain, the heartless sister who had cruelly abandoned her family in their time of need. At first, I tried to explain my side of the story. I spent hours on the phone with aunts, uncles, and cousins, detailing the 6 months of financial strain, the broken promises, the constant babysitting, the blatant disrespect. I recounted the extravagant spending, the lies, the manipulation, all in an attempt to justify my actions and defend my character. But it was like talking to a wall. They'd already made up their minds, based on Mom's carefully crafted narrative of the cruel sister who threw her family out on the street. They refused to listen to my explanations, dismissing my concerns as petty and selfish. "Family is family, Eleanor," they'd say, their voices thick with disapproval. "You should be there for them no matter what." "But what about me?" I'd plead, my voice cracking with frustration. "What about my life? Don't I deserve to have some peace and quiet? Don't I deserve to be treated with respect?" But my pleas fell on deaf ears. They were too caught up in their own sense of moral outrage to see the situation from my perspective. Eventually, I stopped trying to defend myself. I stopped answering the phone, stopped responding to the messages, stopped engaging in the endless cycle of guilt and recrimination. I let them think what they wanted. I had my peace back, my house back, my life back, and that was worth more than their approval. Then, about a month after everything happened, my friend Rachel called with some interesting news. Rachel was always plugged into the family gossip network, a font of information about everyone's latest dramas and triumphs. "You're not going to believe this," she said, trying to contain her laughter. "Your parents kicked Vivian out." I stared at the phone, my jaw dropping in disbelief. "What? Are you serious?" "Dead serious. Apparently your mom couldn't handle it anymore. Said something about them treating her house like a hotel, never helping with anything, and constantly complaining about the food." I burst out laughing, the tension that had been building inside me finally releasing. "Sound familiar?" "Exactly," Rachel said, her laughter joining mine. 6 months you dealt with it, and your parents couldn't even make it through one. I have to say, Eleanor, I'm starting to think you're the sane one in this whole mess. I savored the moment, reveling in the sweet taste of vindication. It wasn't that I wanted my parents to suffer, but it was gratifying to know that they were finally experiencing the reality of living with Vivian and Joshua, that they were finally understanding the toll it had taken on me. But the real kicker came a few weeks later when my cousin, Jessica, reached out. Jessica had always been the family gossip queen, the one who knew everyone's secrets and wasn't afraid to share them. Under normal circumstances, I'd avoid her like the plague, but for once, I was grateful for her tendency to stir the pot. "Eleanor, you need to hear this," she said, her voice practically buzzing with excitement. "Oh, God, what now?" I sighed, bracing myself for another round of family drama. "Vivian and Joshua found an apartment, but guess what they're doing with their money now?" I groaned. "Let me guess, another get-rich-quick scheme?" "Bingo! They're investing in some space startup." I pressed my hand to my forehead, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over me. "A space startup? Are you serious?" "Dead serious. Vivian is going around to all the relatives, telling everyone how this is going to make her rich. Says she's going to buy a house twice the size of yours, with a rocket ship in the backyard." I couldn't help but laugh, the absurdity of the situation striking me as darkly comical. "She's incorrigible, isn't she?" "Oh, it gets better," Jessica continued, her voice practically dripping with glee. "She's trying to get everyone to invest with her. Says it's a ground floor opportunity or something like that. Please tell me no one is actually falling for it," I said, my voice laced with concern. "Well, Aunt Mildred is considering it, and Uncle George is always looking for a good investment. She came to my house last week with all these fancy presentations about space mining or whatever." I just smiled and nodded, but inside I was thinking, "Girl, have you learned nothing?" I felt a weird mix of emotions swirling inside me, frustration, pity, and something close to relief. Relief that I'd gotten them out when I did, before they could try to drag me into another one of their schemes. "Thanks, Jessica," I said, my voice sincere. "I appreciate you letting me know. No problem, Eleanor. Just thought you should be warned." "And honestly," she added, lowering her voice conspiratorially, "I think you dodged a bullet. Vivian is, well, I do know," I said, my voice flat. "These days, I don't talk to Vivian anymore. The rift between us feels too wide, too deep, too irreparable. Sometimes I miss my nieces, Clara and Iris. I think about them often, wondering if they're happy, if they're doing well in school, if they're even aware of the chaos that surrounds them. But I know that this distance is necessary. For my own sanity, for my own well-being, I need to keep her at arm's length. She's a black hole, sucking the life and energy out of everything around her. I see their photos on social media sometimes. Vivian's still posting about their exciting investment opportunities, their upcoming wealth, their fabulous life. I try to ignore them, to block them out, but they still manage to seep into my consciousness. A constant reminder of the mess she's made of her life and the lives of those around her. I hope she'll figure things out eventually. I hope she'll learn from her mistakes, grow up and take responsibility for her actions. But I'm done trying to save her from herself. I've learned the hard way that you can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped. As for Mom, we haven't spoken since that night. The night I changed the locks and banished Vivian from my life. But through the family grapevine, thank you again, Jessica, I heard she's been singing a different tune lately. Your mom was at Aunt Linda's last week, Jessica told me, her voice hushed with significance. She actually defended you. Said she finally understands why you did what you did. Apparently, living with Vivian opened her eyes to how difficult it is to share your space with people who don't respect your boundaries. I just smiled when I heard that. Sometimes, people need to experience something themselves before they can understand your perspective. Sometimes they need to walk a mile in your shoes before they can truly appreciate the burden you've been carrying. Mom might come around eventually. She might finally see that I wasn't being selfish or cruel, but simply trying to protect myself and my sanity. And if she does, if she's willing to acknowledge the pain she's caused me and offer a genuine apology, I'll be here. But this time, it'll be on my terms. I'll set the boundaries. I'll define the relationship. I'll no longer be the dutiful daughter, the reliable sister, the family doormat. I'll be Eleanor, a woman who has finally learned to value her own worth, to prioritize her own well-being, to protect her own peace. And that, I realize, is the most valuable lesson of all. The lesson that Vivian, in her own twisted way, has finally taught me. Now, when I look in the mirror, the metallic taste of fear is still there, but it's mixed with something else. A flicker of defiance, a spark of hope, a whisper of freedom. The locks are changed, the boundaries are set. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm finally in control of my own life. The end? Maybe. Or maybe it's just the beginning. The beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where I'm the hero of my own story, not just a supporting character in someone else's drama. And that, I think, is a story worth telling. A few months have passed since that final showdown, and the dust has mostly settled. The storm of family drama has subsided, leaving behind a sense of quiet and a lingering sense of unease. I've thrown myself into my work, burying myself in spreadsheets and financial reports, finding solace in the order and predictability of numbers. It's a temporary escape, I know, but it helps to keep the memories at bay, to silence the nagging voice of guilt that still whispers in my ear. My house is peaceful again, clean, organized, and blessedly quiet. The exotic smells are gone, replaced by the familiar scent of lavender and lemon cleaner. The electricity and water bills are back to normal, a welcome relief after months of financial stress. But the silence is also a reminder of what's been lost. The laughter of children no longer echoes through the halls. The warmth of family gatherings is replaced by a cold, empty space. I've started taking long walks in the evenings, exploring the quiet streets of my neighborhood, seeking solace in the beauty of nature. The trees are turning golden and red, the air is crisp and cool, and the sunsets are breathtaking. It's a bittersweet beauty, a reminder of the passing of time and the impermanence of all things. I've also reconnected with old friends, people I'd neglected during the months of family chaos. We go to movies, have dinner, and just talk, sharing our lives and supporting each other through the ups and downs. It's a reminder that family isn't just about blood. It's about connection, support, and unconditional love. And sometimes you find that in the most unexpected places. One evening, while having dinner with Rachel, she dropped another bombshell. "So, remember that space startup Vivian invested in?" she said, her eyes sparkling with mischief. I groaned. "Please don't tell me it crashed and burned." "Not yet," Rachel said, chuckling. "But apparently they're having some technical difficulties." "Technical difficulties?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah, something about the rocket not launching properly. Or maybe it was the satellite malfunctioning. I don't know the details, but I heard through the grapevine that Vivian is freaking out. She's convinced the whole thing is another scam. I couldn't help but feel a pang of pity for her. Despite everything, despite the pain she's caused me, I still care about her. I still want her to find happiness and success, even if it seems like an impossible dream. "Has she reached out to you?" Rachel asked, her voice softening slightly. I shook my head. "Not a word. I think she's too ashamed. Or maybe she's just too proud to admit she needs help." "Well, if she does, you know I'm here for you," Rachel said, squeezing my hand. "You've been through so much, Eleanor. You deserve some peace and quiet." I smiled, grateful for her support. "Thanks, Rachel. I appreciate that." A few days later, as I was getting ready for work, my doorbell rang. I hesitated for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. Who could it be? I wasn't expecting anyone. I peered through the peephole and saw Clara and Iris. My heart skipped a beat. What were they doing here? They looked so small, so vulnerable, standing on my doorstep. I opened the door, my voice trembling slightly. "Clara? Iris? What are you doing here?" Clara, the older of the two, stepped forward, clutching a tattered teddy bear in her arms. "Aunt Eleanor," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Mommy said we could come see you." "Mommy sent you?" I repeated, my mind racing. Yes, Iris chimed in, her eyes wide and pleading. She said you miss us. And we miss you too. I knelt down, trying to meet their gaze. I do miss you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. But why did your mommy send you here alone? Clara shrugged. She said she had to go. Somewhere. She said we could stay with you for a little while. A wave of panic washed over me. Somewhere? What did that mean? Was Vivian in trouble? Had she finally cracked under the pressure? Where? Where did she go? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Clara and Iris exchanged a look, their faces etched with worry. We don't know, Clara said. She just said she had to take care of something. I stood up, my mind racing. This wasn't right. Something was definitely wrong. Come on in, I said, ushering them inside. Let's get you some breakfast. And then we'll figure out what to do. As I led them into the kitchen, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to be drawn back into Vivian's chaos, whether I wanted to or not. The next few hours were a blur of frantic phone calls and mounting anxiety. I tried calling Vivian, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I called my parents, but they hadn't heard from her either. This isn't like her, Mom said, her voice tight with concern. She always tells us where she's going, especially when the girls are involved. I tried to remain calm, but a knot of dread was tightening in my stomach. Where was Vivian? And what was she up to? Clara and Iris, oblivious to the turmoil swirling around them, were happily munching on pancakes and watching cartoons, their faces radiating a temporary sense of peace. I envied their innocence, their ability to find joy in the simple things, even in the midst of chaos. As the morning wore on, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit around and hope that Vivian would suddenly reappear. Girls, I said, turning off the television, I need to go out for a little while. I have to try and find your mommy. Will you be okay here by yourselves? Clara, ever the responsible older sister, nodded solemnly. We'll be okay, Aunt Eleanor. We promise. I hesitated for a moment, feeling a pang of guilt about leaving them alone. But I knew I had no choice. I had to find Vivian, for their sake as much as my own. I drove to Vivian's apartment, the familiar route stirring up a mix of painful memories. The complex was run down and depressing, a far cry from the lavish homes she'd once inhabited. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding in my chest. No answer? I tried the doorknob. It was unlocked. I cautiously pushed the door open and stepped inside. The apartment was a mess. Clothes scattered everywhere, dishes piled in the sink, a general air of neglect hanging in the air. Vivian? I called out, my voice trembling slightly. Vivian, are you here? Silence. I walked through the apartment, searching for any sign of her. The bedroom was empty, the bed unmade. The bathroom was a disaster. Makeup strewn across the counter, empty perfume bottles littering the floor. As I was about to give up, I noticed a note on the kitchen table, held down by a half-eaten apple. I picked it up, my hands shaking, and began to read. Eleanor, I know I've messed up. I've messed up everything. I'm so sorry. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep failing. I can't keep disappointing everyone. I'm leaving. I don't know where I'm going or what I'm going to do, but I can't stay here. Please take care of Clara and Iris. They need you. They always have. You're a good person, Eleanor. You're strong, and you're responsible, and you'll do the right thing. I love you, even if I don't always show it. Please forgive me. Vivian, I sank into a chair, the note trembling in my hands. Tears streamed down my face, a mixture of sadness, anger, and a deep, aching sense of despair. She was gone. She had abandoned her children, her life, her responsibilities. She had run away from her problems, leaving me to pick up the pieces. What was I supposed to do now? I was already stretched to the breaking point, juggling work, finances, and my own emotional baggage. How could I possibly take care of two young children? But as I thought about Clara and Iris, about their trusting faces and their innocent hearts, I knew I had no choice. I couldn't abandon them. I couldn't let them fall through the cracks. I took a deep breath, wiped away my tears, and stood up. I had a lot of work to do. First, I needed to find Vivian. I couldn't just let her disappear. She needed help, whether she realized it or not. Second, I needed to figure out a long-term plan for Clara and Iris. I couldn't just keep them with me indefinitely. It wasn't fair to them, and it wasn't fair to me. And third, I needed to forgive her. I needed to let go of the anger and resentment that had been poisoning our relationship for so long. I needed to find a way to move forward, to heal the wounds, and to build a new future. For all of us, it was a daunting task, an overwhelming challenge, but I knew I couldn't back down. I had to be strong, for the sake of my nieces, for the sake of my family, and for the sake of myself. I left the apartment, the note clutched tightly in my hand, a heavy weight settling on my shoulders. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I wasn't alone. I had Clara and Iris, and they had me. And together, we would face whatever challenges lay ahead. The first step was finding Vivian, and I knew exactly where to start. There was only one place she ever went when she needed to escape. One place that was special to the two of us, where we shared memories both good and bad. I was willing to bet that she was there. The drive to Grandma's old house felt like a trip back in time. The memories flooded me, a chaotic mix of laughter and tears, of childhood joys and teenage angst. This house, it held the key to so much of our shared history, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It was where we spent countless summers, running through the sprawling gardens, building forts in the woods, and swimming in the old pond. It was where we learned to ride our bikes, where we had our first crushes, and where we shared our deepest secrets. But it was also where we fought, where we argued, where we competed for our parents' attention and affection. It was where Vivian always seemed to shine brighter, to be more loved, more admired, more everything. The house had been sold after Grandma died, but the new owners had allowed me to visit occasionally, knowing how much it meant to me. It was a sanctuary, a place where I could reconnect with the past and find a sense of peace. As I pulled up to the house, my heart skipped a beat. It looked just as I remembered it, the white paint gleaming in the sunlight, the porch swing gently swaying in the breeze, the garden overflowing with colorful flowers. I got out of the car and walked up to the front door, my hands trembling slightly. I rang the bell, and a moment later, the door was opened by a kind-faced woman with a warm smile. "Eleanor! How lovely to see you," she said, her voice welcoming. "I wasn't expecting you today." "I know," I said, returning her smile. "I'm sorry to drop by unannounced, but I was wondering if you'd seen my sister Vivian. She's been going through a difficult time, and I thought she might have come here." The woman's smile faltered slightly. "Actually," she said, hesitating, "she is here. She arrived a few hours ago." She seemed very distraught. "Can I see her?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Of course," the woman said, stepping aside. "She's in the garden." "I'll leave you to it." I walked through the house, my footsteps echoing in the silent halls. The familiar scent of lavender and potpourri filled the air, a comforting reminder of Grandma's presence. I stepped out into the garden and saw her. Vivian was sitting on a bench beneath the old oak tree, her head buried in her hands, her body shaking with sobs. I walked towards her, my heart aching with compassion. She looked so small, so broken, so utterly lost. "Vivian?" I said softly, my voice filled with tenderness. She looked up, her face streaked with tears, her eyes red and swollen. "Eleanor," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What are you doing here?" "I came to find you," I said, sitting down beside her and taking her hand. "The girls told me you left them. I was worried." She pulled her hand away, her face hardening. "You shouldn't have come," she said, her voice laced with anger. "I don't want your pity. It's not pity," I said, my voice gentle. "It's love." I love you, Vivian, even when you make things difficult. Even when you push me away. She scoffed. You don't understand, she said, her voice breaking. I'm a failure, Eleanor. I've ruined everything. I've lost my house, my money, my reputation. I've even lost my children. What kind of mother does that? A mother who needs help, I said, my voice firm. A mother who is struggling. A mother who is hurting. And that's okay, Vivian. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to admit that you're not perfect. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and hope. Do you really think so? She whispered. I know so, I said, squeezing her hand. We all make mistakes, Vivian. It's what we do after those mistakes that matters. It's how we pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and keep moving forward. But what about the girls? She asked, her voice trembling. They deserve so much better than me. They deserve a mother who loves them, I said, my voice soft. A mother who is present and engaged. A mother who is willing to fight for them. And I know you can be that mother, Vivian. I know you have it in you. She leaned her head on my shoulder, her body shaking with sobs. I don't know what to do, she whispered. I'm so lost. We'll figure it out, I said, wrapping my arms around her. Together! We always do. And in that moment, as we sat there beneath the old oak tree, surrounded by the beauty of Grandma's garden, I knew that we would. It wouldn't be easy. It would take time, patience, and a whole lot of forgiveness. But we would get through it. We would heal the wounds, rebuild the trust, and create a new future. Together. Because that's what family is all about. It's about being there for each other. Through thick and thin, through good times and bad. It's about offering love, support, and understanding, even when it's the hardest thing to do. And as I held my sister close, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, as a family. And that, I realized, was the most important thing of all. The ending was not the end, it was a new beginning. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Getting Vivian the help she needed was my top priority. I found a therapist specializing in addiction and depression, and, to my relief, Vivian agreed to attend sessions regularly. It was a slow process, filled with tears, setbacks, and moments of doubt, but Vivian persevered. She started to confront her demons, to understand the patterns that had led her down the wrong path, and to develop healthy coping mechanisms. Finding stable housing was another challenge. Vivian's apartment was unsuitable for the girls, and I couldn't continue to shoulder the responsibility of caring for them full-time while managing my own life. After countless calls and applications, we finally found a small but clean and safe apartment in a decent school district. It wasn't much, but it was a fresh start. The biggest hurdle, however, was rebuilding trust with Clara and Iris. They had been through so much upheaval, so much disappointment, that they were understandably wary of their mother. Vivian made a conscious effort to be present in their lives, attending school events, helping with homework, and simply spending quality time with them. She read them bedtime stories, took them to the park, and listened to their worries and their dreams. Slowly, tentatively, they began to open up to her again, their faces radiating a renewed sense of hope. I became a constant presence in their lives as well, offering support to both Vivian and the girls. I helped with childcare, drove them to appointments, and provided a listening ear when they needed to vent. I rediscovered the joy of being an aunt, the unconditional love and the unwavering support that I had previously kept at arm's length. One afternoon, while helping Clara with her math homework, she looked up at me with her bright, innocent eyes and said, "Aunt Eleanor, thank you for helping Mommy. She's been really sad lately, but now she's smiling more." Her words touched me deeply, a reminder of the impact I was having on their lives. It wasn't always easy, juggling my own responsibilities with the needs of my family, but it was worth it. As Vivian continued to heal and rebuild her life, she started to explore new career options. She realized that the world of high-pressure marketing wasn't for her, that she needed something more meaningful, more fulfilling. She'd always had a knack for art, and she began taking painting classes at a local community center. She discovered a hidden talent, a passion that ignited her soul and brought a sense of purpose back into her life. She started selling her paintings at local craft fairs and online, and to her surprise, they were a hit. People were drawn to her vibrant colors, her unique style, and the raw emotion that poured from her canvases. She even started getting commissions, painting portraits of families and pets. One day, she called me, her voice filled with excitement. "Eleanor, you won't believe it. I got a grant from the city to open my own art studio. Can you believe it?" "Me, an artist," I laughed, tears welling up in my eyes. "I always knew you had it in you, Vivian," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of you." The grand opening of Vivian's art studio was a family affair. My parents were there, beaming with pride. Clara and Iris helped decorate the space with their own artwork. Rachel and other friends came to show their support. And I stood beside Vivian, my heart overflowing with love and admiration. As I looked around at the smiling faces, at the colorful paintings, and at my sister, standing tall and proud, I realized how far we had come. We had faced our demons, overcome our challenges, and emerged stronger, more resilient, and more connected than ever before. The journey wasn't over, of course. There would still be bumps in the road, setbacks and challenges to overcome, but we were ready. We had learned the importance of forgiveness, of compassion, and of unwavering support. We had learned that family isn't just about blood, it's about love, connection, and a shared commitment to building a better future together. And as I held Vivian's hand, I knew that we could face whatever challenges lay ahead as long as we had each other. The metallic taste of fear was gone, replaced by the sweet taste of hope, of love, and of a future filled with endless possibilities. We were a family, bound by blood, by love, and by a shared commitment to healing and growing together. And that was a bond that could never be broken. The end.